I don't know if you've ever had one of these earworms. You know, a song that gets stuck in your head and it just keeps going around and around until you just can't get it out of there. I've had a Christmas earworm ever since our choir did our Winterfest Christmas concert here at the Old Stone Church back the last week of November, Thanksgiving weekend. And it's not a typical Christmas song that you might imagine. It wasn't, "Oh, come all ye faithful," or "Joy to the World," or anything like that. It's actually a song that was written by Kendall Gunlicks, and I think he's over there. Is he over there today? There he is. It's called "See the Little Baby." I don't know if any of you remember it, but they say to get rid of an earworm, the best way is to give it to someone else. And I've been walking around all Advent singing "See the Little Baby," probably driving my wife a little bonkers because I just can't get it out of there. It's such a great gospel song and a reminder about this little baby, Jesus, lying there on the hay. And so I would encourage you, go look it up on our YouTube channel, enjoy it. One of, our own Kendall Gunlicks from our own choir wrote the song. And if I can get you listening to it and singing it, then maybe I can relax and get a new earworm for the next season. But as I've been singing "See the Little Baby" throughout the season of Advent, I've been put in a place where I have wondered once again why it is that God chose to begin the Christian narrative, the Christian story, with the birth of a child, a baby. I don't know about you, have you stopped to think about that for a while? Why is it that God begins the Christian story with the birth of a baby? Have we stopped to consider in a while why God's peace on earth and peace within and goodwill to all would come to us in such a simple, vulnerable, yet beautiful and miraculous way as a newborn infant? And the thing is, I've been noticing babies a lot the last few months, watching their behavior, noticing them here in the congregation. I don't know if there's such thing as a grand paternal clock that's ticking within me. Some of you older folks will tell me if that's real or not, and I'm certainly not encouraging my kids to rush into anything too soon. But maybe I've been noticing the kids in the congregation and in my world because I finally got enough distance from those days when my own kids were infants 25 or 30 years ago. Those were the days when I often missed the miracles of the infants in my life because I was distracted by the responsibilities of being a father, the struggle to be a modern man who worked from home so he could spend more time with his children, time in my life when I was changing diapers and I joined Beth in getting up in the middle of the night to attend to those infants. Now, it seems to me at this point in my life, the beauty of infants is so much easier to appreciate because I no longer have the responsibility of having those infants in my care. Or as I used to say when my kids were young, they're really, really beautiful when they're sleeping. It's when the responsibility has settled down somewhat. But this year I've been noticing something about the little ones, the infants in our congregation. Or to be more precise, I've been noticing what they have been doing to me. And the first time I noticed this was the first Sunday in Advent when I baptized Ian and Jessica Atwood's newborn daughter, Maggie Jo, Margaret Jo Atwood. And we're over here in the baptismal area, the baptistry, and Ian and Jessica were standing up there, and Jessica had Maggie Jo in her arms. And Maggie Jo, if you were here, you may remember she was kind of fussing a little, and she was squawking a little, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, we're going to have a screaming child on our hands for baptism. Just wait till this water hits her. But that isn't what happened at all. In fact, she put Maggie Jo in my arms, and she just fit perfectly there in my arms. And it was such a wonderful, blessed feeling to have this perfectly weighted human being in my arms. And when I made the sign of the cross on her forehead, and then I poured the water on her head. She didn't squawk or scream or cry at all. She just looked at me with these curious eyes like, "What did you just do to me?" And then as I walked Maggie Joe down through the congregation, you may remember the choir sang our baptismal blessing song. May God who creates you give you life. Actually, maybe we sang it that day as a congregation. I think the choir was off. Tommy and Tia were here that day. And you sang it. And as you sang it, she seemed to settle down. And I always talk to the kids. I find if I can make my voice go up and down enough times, I'll distract them and they'll settle down. So I always say, well, look at all these people. Who are these people? These are your new brothers and sisters in Christ. Isn't this one? And the kids are like, who is this guy? But she settled down, not just from the squawking and the squirming, she settled down with a kind of peace about herself. And when she was settled down with that kind of peace in herself, in my arm, it blessed me with a kind of peace in my own heart. In fact, Ian and Jessica posted a photograph on Facebook later that day of me baptizing Maggie Joe over there by the Christmas tree. And I saw the picture and I thought, that's it. It captured how I felt. You know, as a pastor, you have many ups and many downs, but there are a few moments when it feels like the curtain that separates us from God's mysterious love gets drawn back and the mystery sort of enters into your life and you feel incredibly blessed. That was one of those moments. Having that child in my arms that day blessed me with a kind of peace that passes all understanding. And then 2 weeks ago, on the third Sunday of Advent, the day of our wonderful, wonderful Sunday school pageant, Milan Opawal was playing Mary that day. Milan, who's one of our older children. And Jesus was played by the part of Jack, Mark and Haley Lamon's little guy, Jack Lamon, who might be about 3 months of age, maybe 4 months of age. And I came in through this door before the service started, and Mom, Haley, was sitting there in the front row with Jack in her arms. And I came up, and, you know, I apologize to all mothers and fathers in the room. When you have a baby in your arm, you know you're invisible, right? Everybody goes right in for the child, and that's the way I was. There's Jack. I baptized this kid a few months earlier, or a month or two earlier, and I came up, I said, "Hi, Jack, how are you?" And Jack looked at me with these big, beautiful eyes, and he smiled when he looked at me. You know, when a kid smiles at you, you think you did that. You know, you think, look, the child is smiling because of me, and maybe he was, but the thing about Jack is, Jack smiles at everybody. And when Jack smiles at you, you feel awesome. There's that mysterious sense of joy and delight and peace, and maybe all three mixed together and then some added in on top. It's like your spirit feels right with the world when baby Jack smiles at you. Well, then once the pageant got started and Milan came in, and she's holding baby Jack up here at the front of the church, and we're telling the story of the birth of Jesus and how Mary and Joseph gave birth to this child in the stable in Bethlehem, and we started singing, "O Little Town of Bethlehem," and I was sitting in this front pew here, so I had a good view on the play, and I noticed Milan look down at Jack, and Jack smiled up at Milan, and then she smiled. And I thought, she's experiencing something of the mystery that I had experienced when Jack smiled at me. You have to admit, babies do something to us, especially when they're not our own or when they're sleeping, but they also do something when they smile at us, when they settle down and create this peace in our own arms. They call something out of us that is too often hiding or buried beneath our daily troubles and worries and responsibilities about raising children. They call out of us a kind of kindness or a tenderness or even a peace that's there all the time. They call out of us the very identity, I believe, in which God created us. They call out our godly self. Have you ever stopped to consider why parents or grandparents put a sign in the car window that says, "Baby on board"? I think parents and grandparents and others put "baby on board" signs in their car windows because they know that people will be more careful around them when they are carrying a baby. And I think they know others on the road will excuse their cautious driving because they've got a baby on board. Well, listen, some days when I consider the brutality of our world, some days when I consider just how broken our world can be, the attacks in Aleppo, terrorist bombings on Christian churches in Cairo, violence, political unrest, racial divisions in our own American cities, I think to myself, wouldn't it be great just to hold a baby right now? In the face of all the brokenness of this world, holding a baby creates this kind of peace. It calls something out of us. Some days, don't you wish the world itself had a baby to hold? Think about it. You can't raise fists of anger against your friends, your neighbors, or even your enemies when you're holding a baby. You can't hold weapons of any kind of destruction when you're holding an infant. You can't fire a gun. You can't build nuclear bombs when you're holding a baby. And you can't meddle in your friends' affairs or your children's affairs or your parents' affairs, or you even micromanage your own affairs when you're busy holding a baby. After all, that baby needs you. That baby needs you to care for it because it's vulnerable. And you need, if you're honest, you need that baby to bring you peace and to bring you joy. You know, there are senior centers now and hospitals that now have pets on campus to bring people a sense of purpose and comfort. It's kind of pet therapy. I've been thinking, you know, the world needs a little child therapy today. And I don't mean putting the kids in therapy. I mean putting the kids in our arms because they're very therapeutic for us. I think we need therapy babies for us all to hold in this day and age. I was thinking, can you imagine if President-elect Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin each held a baby in their arms when they sat down to talk about nuclear weapons or cyber attacks or cyber hacking? Well, Vlad, you just don't understand. We've got to build up nuclear arms. No, Donald, I don't think so. Oops, excuse me, Donald. My baby just smiled at me. I don't think so, Vlad. I think he was smiling at me. It's hard to prepare for war when you're holding a baby in your arm. It's hard to be in conflict when you've got this vulnerable one in your arms and you are being blessed with joy and peace. Listen, I think God knew full well what God was doing when God chose to begin the Christian era with a child. God was giving us a baby to hold, to care for, with the intention that the baby might call out of us a deeper sense of hope, of peace, of joy, and yes, even love. Listen, if anyone asks you what you got for Christmas this year, why don't you freak them out and say, for Christmas this year, I got a baby. And if they ask you, well, what was that baby's name? You just say his name is Jesus. Praise be to God. Amen.